Rachel Ashford had conducted over 1,000 interviews in her career. She had never once made a mistake. Until today. The man sitting across from her, Clinton Thompson, single father, former warehouse supervisor, was never supposed to be in this room. A system glitch had brought him here to an interview for a position he was wildly unqualified for. One apology, and everything would return to order. But when Clinton stood to leave without complaint, without begging, without even a flicker of resentment in his eyes, Rachel found herself unable to speak. What if sending him away was the real mistake? The 40th floor of Horizon Group headquarters offered a view that most people would never see in their lifetime. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the Manhattan skyline like a living painting, and the morning sun cast long shadows across Italian marble floors. Everything in this office had been selected with precision. The minimalist furniture, the temperature set to exactly 68 degrees, the complete absence of personal photographs on Rachel Ashford's desk. Rachel preferred it that way. Sentiment was clutter, and clutter led to inefficiency. At 38 years old, she had built Horizon Group from a startup operating out of her college apartment into a technology empire worth over $12 billion. Business magazines called her the Ice Queen of Silicon Alley. Her employees called her Ms. Ashford, and nothing else. She had earned both titles through 15 years of relentless discipline, strategic brilliance, and an almost inhuman ability to remove emotion from every decision she made. Today's schedule included 4 interviews for the Chief Operating Officer position, the second most powerful seat in her company. Each candidate had been pre-screened through 7 rounds of evaluation. Each possessed an MBA from a top 10 program, at least 15 years of executive experience, and references that read like a who's who of Fortune 500 leadership. The man currently sitting across from her had none of these things. Clinton Thompson wore a suit that was at least 5 years old, though it had been pressed with obvious care. His shoes were polished but worn at the heels. He sat with his back straight, his hands resting calmly on his knees and his eyes meeting hers without flinching. Rachel had noticed that detail immediately. Most candidates, even the accomplished ones, showed some nervousness in her presence. They fidgeted with their watches, cleared their throats too often, or let their gazes drift to the window when her questions grew pointed. Clinton did none of these things. For 20 minutes, she had asked him about leadership philosophy, crisis management, organizational scaling. His answers were thoughtful, practical, surprisingly insightful. He spoke about people the way most executives spoke about quarterly projections, with genuine investment in their outcomes. Rachel found herself leaning forward slightly, intrigued despite herself. Then the door opened. Rachel, her executive assistant, stepped inside with an expression Rachel had never seen before, something between embarrassment and barely controlled panic. "Ms. Ashford, I need to speak with you. Privately, it's urgent." Rachel raised one eyebrow but maintained her composure. She turned to Clinton with a practiced smile. "Would you excuse us for a moment, Mr. Thompson?" Clinton nodded. "Of course." In the hallway, Rachel's words came out in a rush. "There's been a system error, a significant one. The AI scheduling software crossed 2 candidate files. Clinton Thompson was supposed to interview for the logistics coordinator position in Building C. He's not—" Rachel swallowed hard. "He's not a COO candidate. He applied for an entry-level operations role. $45,000 a year." Rachel felt something cold settle in her chest. "What are you telling me?" "He has a community college degree, 10 years of warehouse management experience. His last company went bankrupt 8 months ago." Rachel looked like she might be sick. "I don't know how this happened. The system flagged him as a top-tier executive candidate. All his materials were reformatted to match our senior interview protocols. I only caught it because I manually cross-referenced his social security number." For a long moment, Rachel said nothing. In her mind, she replayed the last 20 minutes. Clinton's calm demeanor, his articulate responses, the way he had held her gaze without wavering. She had been impressed by a warehouse supervisor who didn't belong in her building. The thought should have made her angry. Instead, she felt something she couldn't quite name. "I'll handle it," she said finally. "Return to your desk." Back in her office, Rachel studied Clinton with new eyes. He sat exactly as she had left him, patient and composed, apparently unaware that his entire presence here was a mistake. "Mr. Thompson," she began, settling into her chair, "I've just been informed of an unusual situation." "The scheduling error," Clinton said quietly. Rachel's expression flickered. "You knew?" "I suspected." Clinton met her gaze steadily. "When your assistant mentioned the COO position in her confirmation call, I assumed there had been some confusion. I applied for a logistics coordinator role, entry level." "Then why did you come?" The question hung in the air between them. Clinton considered it carefully before answering. "Because I've been unemployed for 8 months. Because I have a 6-year-old daughter who needs stability. Because when someone offers you a door, even if it's the wrong door, you walk through it and see where it leads." He straightened his tie, an unconscious gesture. "I never intended to deceive anyone. I answered every question honestly. I just didn't correct an assumption that wasn't mine to correct." Rachel should have ended the conversation there. A polite apology, a referral to the correct department, perhaps a note to HR about the software malfunction. Clean, efficient, appropriate. Instead, she found herself studying him more closely, searching for something she couldn't quite define. Clinton rose from his chair with quiet dignity. "I appreciate your time, Ms. Ashford. I know you have qualified candidates waiting. I won't take any more of your morning." He extended his hand for a professional handshake. As he did, his phone slipped from his jacket pocket, clattering onto the marble floor. Rachel bent to retrieve it at the same moment Clinton did. Their hands nearly touched over the device, and she found herself looking at the lock screen, a photograph of a little girl with bright eyes and butterfly clips in her hair, laughing at something beyond the frame. The image struck Rachel with unexpected force. For just a moment, she wasn't in her corner office anymore. She was standing in a hospital corridor 10 years ago, listening to a doctor explain that her younger brother Ethan had been declared dead on arrival after a car accident. Rachel handed the phone back to Clinton without comment, but when he turned toward the door, she heard herself speak. "Mr. Thompson." He stopped, his hand on the doorframe. "I have a proposal for you. It's unconventional, and you're under no obligation to accept." Clinton turned slowly. His expression revealed nothing. "I'm offering you a 3-month trial position in our operations division. Not as a logistics coordinator, as a special project associate reporting to senior leadership. The role doesn't technically exist yet, which means there's no precedent for success or failure." Rachel kept her voice carefully neutral. "You'll receive no special treatment, no protection from evaluation, and no guarantee of continued employment. If you don't perform, you'll be terminated without severance. If you do perform, we'll discuss permanent placement." For the first time, she saw something like surprise cross Clinton's face. Why? It was a fair question. Rachel wasn't entirely sure she had an answer. "Because in 20 minutes, you showed me something I rarely see in this building. You were calm under pressure, thoughtful in your responses, and completely uninterested in impressing me. That's either remarkable confidence or remarkable authenticity." She folded her hands on her desk. "I'd like to know which one it is." Clinton was quiet for a long moment. Rachel could see him calculating the risks, the potential costs, the daughter who depended on his stability. "I need to think about it," he said finally. "You have until tomorrow morning. Rachel will give you the details on your way out." Rachel turned back to her computer, signaling the end of the conversation. "I have 3 more interviews today, Mr. Thompson. Don't let me regret giving you this option." Clinton nodded once. Then he walked out of her office without another word. Rachel sat alone in the silence that followed, staring at the empty chair across from her desk. Through the window, the city stretched endlessly toward the horizon, millions of lives moving through carefully constructed systems, each one believing they were in control. She thought about her brother. She thought about the photograph of the little girl with butterfly clips, and she wondered for the first time in years whether her perfect system had ever truly protected her from anything at all. Clinton accepted the offer the following morning. His first day at Horizon Group bore no resemblance to the polished executive floor where he had met Rachel Ashford. The operations division occupied a sprawling warehouse complex in Queens, all concrete floors and fluorescent lighting and the constant hum of machinery. Here workers moved in careful choreography around conveyor belts and loading docks, tracking shipments worth millions of dollars with handheld scanners and tired eyes. Clinton arrived at 6 in the morning, 30 minutes before his scheduled start time. He wore the same pressed suit from his interview, though he had been told business casual was acceptable. First impressions, he had learned, rarely got second chances. Derek Morrison was waiting for him. The operations director stood near the entrance with his arms crossed and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Derek was 42 years old, Harvard-educated, and had spent the last 3 years positioning himself as the obvious choice for the COO role that Rachel had yet to fill. His suits cost more than most employees made in a month. His handshake was firm to the point of aggression. "Clinton Thompson," Derek said, drawing out the syllables. "The man who walked through the wrong door and somehow landed on his feet. Rachel told me to make sure you're properly oriented." "I appreciate that. I'm sure you do." Derek's smile widened. "Let me be direct with you, Clinton. I don't know what happened in that interview room, and frankly, I don't care. What I care about is results. This division runs on precision, accountability, and performance metrics. We don't have room for," he gestured vaguely, "special circumstances." Clinton met his gaze without flinching. "I'm not asking for special circumstances. Just point me to my desk." Something flickered in Derek's expression, surprise, perhaps, or irritation at finding no easy target. He assigned Clinton to a workstation in the corner of the main floor, far from the windows and surrounded by filing cabinets that hadn't been organized in years. "Your first project," Derek said, dropping a thick folder onto the desk. "Inventory reconciliation for the Northeast Distribution Network. The previous analyst quit 2 months ago. You have until Friday." It was Monday. The folder contained over 300 pages of discrepancies. Clinton opened the first page without comment. Behind him, he could hear Derek's footsteps retreating across the concrete floor, followed by the low murmur of conversation. He didn't turn around. He already knew what they were saying. The next several weeks established a pattern. Clinton received the tasks no one else wanted, the complex reconciliations, the angry vendor calls, the overnight inventory counts that kept him in the warehouse until well past midnight. His colleagues maintained a careful distance, their conversations falling silent whenever he approached the break room. Someone had started a rumor that he was Rachel Ashford's personal project, a diversity hire meant to improve the company's public image. Clinton heard the whispers. He said nothing. He arrived early and left late, except on the days when he needed to pick up his daughter Lily from school. Those absences were noted in his file with clinical precision, each one recorded as evidence of insufficient commitment. What the file didn't capture was the quality of his work. The Northeast inventory reconciliation was completed 2 days ahead of schedule, with errors reduced by 37% from the previous quarter. A shipping dispute that had dragged on for 6 weeks was resolved in a single phone call after Clinton spent an hour simply listening to the frustrated client describe their concerns. A loading dock scheduling conflict that had nearly caused a walkout was diffused when Clinton sat down with both shift supervisors and helped them find a compromise neither had considered. None of this appeared in Derek Morrison's weekly reports to senior leadership. Rachel Ashford made an unannounced visit to the Queen's facility on a Thursday afternoon in late October. It was the kind of thing she rarely did. Her presence in the field made employees nervous and disrupted carefully maintained workflows. But something had been nagging at her since the day she had offered Clinton his trial position, a persistent curiosity she couldn't quite name. She found him on the warehouse floor, standing between two groups of workers who looked ready to tear each other apart. The conflict, she would later learn, stemmed from a scheduling change that had left the night shift with twice the workload and half the recognition. Accusations had been building for weeks, and today they had finally boiled over into a shouting match that stopped all work in the Eastern Wing. Clinton didn't shout back. He didn't invoke authority or threaten consequences. Instead, he pulled two chairs into the center of the floor and sat down in one of them, gesturing for the night shift supervisor to take the other. "Tell me what happened," he said quietly. "From the beginning." "I'm listening." Rachel watched from behind a stack of pallets as the supervisor, a heavy-set woman named Gloria, who had worked at Horizon for 11 years, poured out her frustrations. Clinton nodded occasionally, asked clarifying questions, and never once interrupted. When Gloria finished, he turned to the day shift supervisor and repeated the same invitation. 20 minutes later, the two supervisors were talking directly to each other for the first time in months. Clinton had identified the root cause of the conflict, a software update that had inadvertently reassigned workload metrics without notifying either team, and proposed a temporary adjustment that gave both shifts fair recognition until the system could be properly corrected. The workers returned to their stations. The Eastern Wing resumed operations, and Clinton Thompson walked back to his corner desk as if nothing remarkable had happened. Rachel left the warehouse without making her presence known. In the car back to Manhattan, she stared out the window at the passing cityscape and thought about leadership. She had built her empire on the belief that systems could solve any problem, that human error could be engineered away, that efficiency was the highest virtue. Clinton led differently. He led by being present, by listening, by treating every person's concerns as worthy of genuine attention. It was inefficient, time-consuming, impossible to scale, and yet his results spoke for themselves. The crisis came 3 weeks later. A shipment worth $2 million, critical components for Horizon's largest manufacturing client, was delivered to the wrong distribution center in Ohio. By the time the error was discovered, the client had already halted their production line and was threatening to terminate a contract worth $50 million annually. Derek Morrison called an emergency meeting at 7 in the morning. His face was carefully composed, but Rachel could see the tension in his jaw as he addressed the assembled managers. "This is a catastrophic failure of our logistics protocols," Derek announced. "I've reviewed the incident report, and it's clear that the warehouse team deviated from established procedures. I'm recommending immediate disciplinary action against the employees responsible." The room was silent. No one wanted to be the first to speak. Clinton raised his hand. Derek's eyes narrowed. "Yes, Mr. Thompson? I spent last night reviewing the tracking data for that shipment. The warehouse team followed every protocol correctly. The error originated in the routing software, specifically in an update that was deployed 6 weeks ago." Clinton pulled a tablet from his bag and placed it on the conference table. "The update was approved by operations leadership without adequate testing. I have the authorization logs here." Derek's face went pale. The authorization logs bore his digital signature. Rachel studied the tablet screen for a long moment before speaking. "What do you recommend, Mr. Thompson?" "The shipment is currently sitting in a warehouse 90 miles from its intended destination. If we coordinate with 3 independent trucking contractors tonight, we can redirect the components and have them on the client's loading dock by 6 tomorrow morning. I've already identified available drivers. I can make the calls within the hour." "That's outside your job description," Derek interjected. Protocol requires that we solve the problem," Rachel cut him off. "Mr. Thompson, you have authorization. Make the calls. Clinton worked through the night. He coordinated with truck drivers, negotiated expedited delivery fees, and personally monitored the shipment's progress through a tracking app on his phone. By 5:30 the following morning, the components were delivered to the manufacturing client with hours to spare. The contract was saved. Derek Morrison's authority was quietly diminished, and Clinton Thompson had made a powerful enemy. Rachel found him in the warehouse that night, long after the crisis had been resolved and the day shift had gone home. He was helping the cleaning crew stack pallets, his suit jacket abandoned on a nearby chair, his sleeves rolled up to his elbows. "You could have gone home hours ago," she said, stepping out of the shadows. Clinton looked up, unsurprised by her presence. "The night crew is still here. They stayed late because of the emergency. Didn't feel right to leave them cleaning up alone." Rachel walked closer, picking her way around crates and equipment. "Most people in your position would be upstairs celebrating. You just saved a $50 million contract." "I didn't save anything. I just made some phone calls." Clinton set down the pallet he was carrying and straightened up. "The drivers did the hard work. The warehouse team loaded everything correctly the first time. All I did was point people in the right direction." Rachel studied him in the harsh, fluorescent light. He looked tired, dark circles under his eyes, tension in his shoulders, but there was no trace of self-pity in his expression. "Your daughter," she said. "Where is she tonight?" "With her grandmother. I'll pick her up in the morning." Clinton wiped his hands on his trousers. Lily's used to it by now. Her mother worked night shifts too before she got sick. Rachel didn't press further. She sensed there was more to the story, but this wasn't the moment to ask. Instead, she sat down on a nearby crate, her designer heels incongruous against the concrete floor. For a while, neither of them spoke. The warehouse hummed quietly around them, the soft whir of ventilation systems, the distant beep of a forklift backing up, the ordinary sounds of a world that kept moving regardless of crisis or resolution. "Why do you do it?" Rachel asked finally. "Stay late. Help the cleaning crew. Take on work that isn't yours. Most people would do the minimum required and go home to their families." Clinton considered the question carefully. "Because work isn't just about tasks. It's about people, and people remember how you made them feel long after they've forgotten what you accomplished." It was such a simple philosophy. Rachel had built a $12 billion empire on complexity, algorithms and metrics and optimization strategies that filled entire server rooms. And here was a man with a community college degree telling her that leadership came down to making people feel seen. The strange thing was, she believed him. 2 weeks later, Clinton's daughter appeared in the office. A water main break had closed Lily's elementary school without warning, and Clinton had no choice but to bring her to work. He set her up in a quiet corner with crayons and paper, apologizing profusely to his supervisor for the disruption. Rachel happened to walk through the operations floor that afternoon. She stopped when she saw the little girl hunched over her artwork, tongue poking out in concentration. Lily had drawn a picture of two figures holding hands, a tall man and a small girl with butterfly clips in her hair. Above them, in wobbly 6-year-old handwriting, were the words, "Daddy is my hero." Rachel stood frozen, staring at the crude drawing. Something old and painful stirred in her chest. Lily looked up and caught her watching. The girl's eyes were bright and curious, completely unafraid of the imposing woman in the expensive suit. "Do you have a daddy?" Lily asked. The question was innocent. The answer was not. Rachel had a father, a distant, demanding man who had built his own business empire and expected his children to earn every scrap of his approval. He had never held her hand. He had never been her hero. When her brother Ethan died, her father had attended the funeral in a $3,000 suit and returned to the office the same afternoon. "Yes," Rachel said finally. "I do. Is he nice?" Rachel looked across the room at Clinton, who was typing furiously at his computer, while glancing at his daughter every few seconds. She watched the way his expression softened each time he looked at Lily, the way his whole body seemed to orient toward her like a compass finding north. "Some fathers are nicer than others," she said quietly. The rumors started the following week. Someone had seen Rachel talking to Clinton on the warehouse floor at midnight. Someone else had noticed her unusual interest in the operations division. By the time the whispers reached Derek Morrison's ears, they had transformed into something far more damaging. Suggestions that Clinton Thompson's position had nothing to do with his abilities and everything to do with an inappropriate relationship with the CEO. Derek fed the flames carefully, never making direct accusations but always asking pointed questions. "Interesting that Thompson got that special project assignment, isn't it?" he would say to colleagues. "I wonder what qualifies him for opportunities the rest of us never get." The implications were clear. Clinton was either a diversity token or something worse. Either way, he didn't belong. Clinton felt the shift in atmosphere like a change in temperature. Colleagues who had begun warming to him grew distant again. Conversations stopped when he entered rooms. One afternoon, a middle manager cornered him in the break room and said flatly, "You're lucky, you know. This place isn't meant for people like you. Enjoy it while it lasts." Clinton didn't respond, but that night, alone in his apartment after putting Lily to bed, he sat in the darkness and let himself feel the weight of it all. The assumptions, the suspicions, the constant need to prove that he had earned his place, that he wasn't a charity case or a checkbox on someone's diversity report. He had felt this weight before, in other jobs, in other cities. He had learned to carry it without complaint. But tonight, it felt heavier than usual. Then Lily got sick. Her asthma had been manageable for years, but a respiratory infection triggered a severe attack in the middle of the night. Clinton rushed her to the emergency room at 2 a.m, holding her small hand as she struggled to breathe, praying to a God he wasn't sure he believed in anymore. She stabilized by dawn. The doctors wanted to keep her for observation. Clinton called the office to explain his absence. Derek recorded it as an unexcused leave violation. Rachel sat alone in her office long after everyone else had gone home. The photograph of her brother Ethan was in her hands, a snapshot from his 21st birthday, the last one he would ever celebrate. He was laughing at something off camera, his whole face bright with joy. She had built Horizon Group in the years that followed his death, channeling her grief into ambition, her guilt into control. Every system she created, every protocol she implemented, every inefficiency she eliminated, all of it was an attempt to construct a world where bad things couldn't happen if you just planned carefully enough. But Clinton Thompson had walked into her life and disrupted everything. He didn't fit her systems. He couldn't be optimized or controlled, and yet something about him made her question whether her systems had ever truly worked at all. The scandal broke on a Tuesday morning. An anonymous email had been sent to every major business publication in New York with a subject line designed for maximum damage. Billionaire CEO's secret relationship with black employee, romance or PR stunt. Attached were photographs taken through the warehouse windows, Rachel and Clinton sitting together in the dim light. Their conversation intimate enough to fuel speculation. The email also included Clinton's personnel file, highlighting his sudden leave of absence for his daughter's medical emergency, framed as evidence of special treatment. By noon, the story was everywhere. Horizon Group's stock dropped 8%. The hashtag Horizon Scandal trended on social media. Rachel's phone buzzed with messages from board members demanding an emergency meeting. Clinton discovered the story when a stranger on the subway recognized him from the photographs. By the time he reached the office, someone had already leaked his home address online. His phone was flooded with messages, some supportive, most hateful. Several included threats specific enough to make his hands shake. Lily had been taunted at school. A classmate's parent had shown their child the news coverage, and the children had repeated what they heard. She came home crying, asking why people were saying mean things about her daddy. Clinton held her until she fell asleep, then sat in the darkness of his kitchen and made a decision. The next morning, he walked into Rachel Ashford's office and placed a single sheet of paper on her desk. "My resignation," he said quietly, "effective immediately." Rachel looked at the letter but didn't touch it. "Clinton, you've worked your entire life to build this company. I'm not going to be the reason you lose it." Clinton's voice was calm, but something in his eyes had gone dim. "Lily needs stability. She needs a father who isn't being attacked on the internet every day. And you need this to go away." "The board wants me to fire you," Rachel said. "My PR team wants me to issue a statement calling your hiring a mistake. Everyone in this building thinks that's the smart play." "They're probably right." Rachel stared at him for a long moment. Clinton stood perfectly still, waiting for her to accept his resignation, to thank him for his service, to let him walk away with what little dignity remained. Instead, she asked, "Is that what you want?" "What I want doesn't matter. It matters to me." The words surprised them both. Clinton looked at her, really looked at her, and for a moment the walls between them seemed thinner than they had ever been. But then he straightened his shoulders and turned toward the door. "Goodbye, Ms. Ashford. Thank you for giving me a chance." He walked out. Rachel watched him go, the resignation letter still untouched on her desk. She didn't call him back. Rachel sat alone in her penthouse that night, surrounded by silence and the glow of city lights far below. The resignation letter lay on the coffee table beside the photograph of Ethan, two pieces of paper that somehow contained everything she had spent a decade trying to escape. Her phone buzzed. The screen showed a name she hadn't seen in months: Mom. Rachel almost let it go to voicemail, but something made her answer. "I saw the news," her mother said. Her voice was softer than Rachel remembered, worn smooth by years of careful distance. "I wanted to make sure you were okay." "I'm fine." "Rachel." The single word carried a weight of history between them. "You don't have to pretend with me." Rachel closed her eyes. "The board wants me to fire him. Everyone thinks it's the smart play. Maybe it is. Is that what you think?" The question hung in the air. Rachel looked at Ethan's photograph, at his laughing face frozen in time. For years, she had kept that grief locked away, buried beneath spreadsheets and strategy meetings and the relentless pursuit of control. But tonight, the walls she had built so carefully were beginning to crack. "I don't know what I think anymore," she admitted. "I've spent so long trying to make everything perfect, trying to build something that couldn't break, and none of it—" Her voice faltered. "None of it brought him back. None of it made the guilt go away." Her mother was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was gentle. "Ethan didn't die because you missed a phone call, sweetheart. He died because there was an accident. You've been punishing yourself for something that was never your fault." A soft breath. "Your father handled grief by working harder. You learned that from him. But there's another way to live. You just have to be brave enough to try it." The words broke something open inside Rachel. She wept then, really wept, for the first time in 10 years. She cried for her brother, for the years she had spent running from pain that found its way in anyway, for the woman she might have been if she had let herself feel instead of control. When the tears finally stopped, she felt emptied out, raw, but also, strangely, lighter. She knew what she had to do. The emergency board meeting convened at 9 the following morning. 12 faces stared at Rachel from around the polished conference table, their expressions ranging from concerned to openly hostile. The chairman, a silver-haired man named Richard Wells, spoke first. "Rachel, I think we all understand the gravity of this situation. The company's reputation is at stake. We need decisive action to restore confidence." "I agree," Rachel said calmly, "which is why I'm here to present the results of our internal investigation." She pressed a button on her laptop, and the conference room screen filled with data, email records, IP addresses, authorization logs. The anonymous leak did not come from outside the company. It was sent from a device registered to Derek Morrison, our operations director. Rachel clicked to the next slide. In his rush to damage Mr. Thompson before this board meeting, Mr. Morrison grew careless. He used his company laptop to send the email, apparently confident that no one would think to investigate him. It traced the source within hours of being asked. The room went silent. Derek Morrison, seated at the far end of the table, had gone pale. Mr. Morrison also appears in authorization logs for the routing software update that caused our $2 million shipping crisis last month. The same crisis that Mr. Thompson resolved overnight, while Mr. Morrison was recommending disciplinary action against innocent employees. "This is absurd," Derek stammered. "I never—" "The evidence is conclusive." Rachel's voice was ice. "Mr. Morrison's employment is terminated effective immediately. Security will escort him from the building." 2 guards appeared at the conference room door. Derek looked around the table for support and found none. He stood slowly, his face a mask of barely contained rage, and walked out without another word. Rachel turned back to the board. "Now, regarding Clinton Thompson, I know many of you expect me to announce his termination as well. To distance the company from the scandal, protect our stock price, move on." She straightened her shoulders. "I'm not going to do that." Richard Wells leaned forward. "Rachel, be reasonable. Clinton Thompson was hired through an unconventional process, but his performance has been exceptional. He resolved a crisis that our senior leadership created. He improved team cohesion in a division that had been dysfunctional for years. He did all of this while facing discrimination, sabotage, and personal attacks that would have broken most people." Rachel met each board member's gaze in turn. "If we fire him now, we're not protecting the company. We're proving that Horizon Group punishes people for being good at their jobs." The room buzzed with murmured objections. Rachel raised her hand for silence. "Mr. Thompson will continue his trial period. His evaluation will be conducted by an independent committee, not by me. If he doesn't meet performance standards, he'll be terminated like any other employee. But he deserves a fair assessment, not a public execution to satisfy the news cycle." The vote was contentious, but in the end, the board approved her proposal by a narrow margin. Rachel walked out of the conference room feeling lighter than she had in years. She found Clinton that evening at a small park near his apartment in Brooklyn. He was sitting on a bench, watching the sun set behind a row of brownstones, his expression unreadable. Rachel sat down beside him without asking permission. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then she pulled his resignation letter from her coat pocket and held it out to him. "I'm not accepting this." Clinton looked at the letter but didn't take it. The board agreed to let you complete your trial, independent evaluation, no special treatment, no protection." Rachel kept her voice steady. "But the decision to stay is yours. I won't force you." Clinton stared at the letter for a long time. Rachel could see him weighing the risks, calculating the costs to himself and his daughter. "Why?" he asked finally. "You could have let me go. It would have been easier for everyone." Rachel thought about Ethan's photograph, about her mother's voice on the phone, about all the years she had spent building walls that kept out everything except loneliness. "Because you reminded me of something I forgot. That control isn't the same as connection, and connection is what actually matters." Clinton held her gaze for a long moment. Then he took the resignation letter from her hand and tore it in half. "Lily asked me this morning if I was scared," he said quietly. "I told her yes. She said, 'Daddy, you always tell me that brave people are scared, but they do it anyway.' She's 6 years old, and she understands something I keep forgetting." Rachel felt something warm bloom in her chest. Smart kid. She gets it from her mother. They sat together on the bench as the last light faded from the sky. No promises were made, no declarations offered. Just two people sitting in comfortable silence, watching the world turn. 3 months later, Horizon Group announced a new initiative called the Second Chance Program, a hiring pathway for qualified candidates whose circumstances didn't fit traditional corporate requirements. The company also launched a support network for employees who were single parents, including flexible scheduling and emergency childcare assistance. Clinton completed his trial period with exemplary evaluations. He was not offered the COO position. His experience didn't qualify him for executive leadership, and Rachel refused to promote him beyond his capabilities just to make a point. Instead, he was appointed Regional Operations Lead for the Northeast Division, a role that matched his skills and gave him room to grow. He earned it. Everyone who worked with him knew that. On a Saturday evening in early spring, Rachel knocked on the door of a small apartment in Brooklyn. Clinton answered, wearing jeans and a faded college sweatshirt, looking more relaxed than she had ever seen him. "Lily's been asking about you," he said, stepping aside to let her in. The apartment was modest but warm. Mismatched furniture, crayon drawings taped to the refrigerator, the smell of something delicious cooking on the stove. Lily ran up to Rachel with a sheet of paper clutched in her hands. "I made you something!" Rachel knelt down to accept the gift. It was a drawing of 3 figures standing together: a tall man, a small girl with butterfly clips, and a woman with long, dark hair. "That's you," Lily explained, pointing to the woman. "I drew you because you smile a lot when you're with Daddy." Rachel felt her throat tighten. She looked up at Clinton, who was watching them with an expression she couldn't quite name. "Thank you, Lily," she managed. "It's beautiful." Later, after dinner, after Lily had been put to bed with a story about a princess who built her own castle, Rachel and Clinton stood together by the kitchen window. "I don't know where this is going," Rachel said softly. Clinton nodded. "Neither do I. Does that scare you?" He considered the question carefully. For a long time, not knowing felt like the most dangerous thing in the world. I needed certainty. I needed control. I needed to protect Lily from anything that might hurt her. He turned to face Rachel. "But lately, I've started to think that not knowing might be okay, as long as you're not facing it alone." Rachel reached out and took his hand. It was a small gesture. Nothing dramatic, nothing final. Just two people choosing to stand together in uncertainty. Through the window, the city glittered like a constellation of small hopes. Somewhere in the apartment behind them, a 6-year-old girl slept peacefully, dreaming of princesses and heroes and a future that hadn't been written yet. They weren't living happily ever after. That was a fairy tale, and real life didn't work that way. But for the first time in longer than either of them could remember, they weren't alone. And that was enough.